I am going to be direct with you. And as the person, Mary, who edits my podcast will know, I am not the most direct person. But I am going to be right now. I want to get sponsorship for this podcast and I want it to grow because I feel the response from this community and the response from the growth in less than a year is that we need to continue these conversations. And to do that, we need sponsorship. We need to be able to pay the team to continue to support me and my time to do this. And how can you help with that? Well, you're listening, so thank you very much. But please, please, please like or leave a review wherever you're listening right now. I literally left another podcast a review on Apple Podcasts the other day, and it took me 2 minutes. It took so little time. I did it from my iPhone. Please, please do it and come and tell me when you've done it so I can thank you personally. Hello, I'm Caroline Marshall, and welcome to Bump to Business Owner, the podcast speaking to mums in business, you. I'll be in conversation with some of the most inspiring women and mothers in enterprise about their journey, how they created their successful businesses alongside raising their children, and what that looks like in work and family life. Hello, and welcome to today's episode of Bump to Business Owner. I am your host, Caroline Marshall, and I'm so pleased to welcome Lauralee Whyte. Lauralee Whyte is an absolute trailblazer in the events industry with nearly 2 decades of experience, from managing complex campaigns for global brands like Coca-Cola and Dove to creating diverse talent and reshaping the speaker landscape. Her journey is one of relentless commitment to change. Lauralee is the founder of Spectrum Speakers. Spectrum was born from a clear need to fill the diversity deficit, to disrupt the generic corporate talent industry and shine a light on the women, BIPOC, LGBTQ+, differently abled, neurodivergent, and socially disadvantaged speakers and entertainers who are leading experts in their own fields, be that finance, technology, or well-being, and not just to be called upon to discuss diversity issues. In addition to this, Lauralee has recently taken on the role as Chief Hype Woman at It Takes a Village Collective, a global insight study, charter, and membership amplifying Black female talent in media and advertising. Lauralee is also a board director for Deaf Rave and a mentor for Elevate. Lauralee herself was the DOTS 100 Black Trailblazers redefining the industry in 2021. She was also shortlisted for the We Are the City Rising Star Award 2022. All of this while juggling another important role, motherhood. I got through it.
Yay. I was like, who is that you're talking about?
It's you.
Who
Let's
is
not
she? She sounds great.
let's not talk it down. It's you. Let's own it. That's why we do this, and that's why I do those intros, because I'm like, yes, girl. How much have you done? Oh my goodness. So, but it all starts somewhere, doesn't it? And so I love hearing
Absolutely.
from women and mums who are making a change, which you definitely are. And you have an interesting career and business path. So tell us what led you to starting Spectrum Speakers. While I kind of did a bit of that, what's the real story?
Yeah. Um, I mean, I've worked in the events industry my entire life, pretty much. And I guess kind of like fast forward to the last few years of being a speaker agent. Um, it was great. I was kind of working on, great campaigns and with great speakers and entertainers, but it was really generic. And yeah, just kind of totally homogenous. And I know we were kind of talking about like starting a business in the pandemic, but just to kind of jump ahead, that I started Spectrum not because of the pandemic so much, but everything that was going on in the pandemic allowed me to kind of take stock on what was going on in the world. How was I showing up, and how was I contributing or being complicit to some of the issues and challenges that were really prominent at the time? So, namely, obviously, the George Floyd murder and
Mm.
Black Lives Matter. And it just became evident to me that I was being complicit in my work by just kind of going along with the homogeny and booking the same speakers, the same profile of speakers for the same events time and time again. And the only time I was being asked to book different speakers was just to talk about diversity, and it just felt a bit like, sometimes feels a bit like trauma mining. And there are lots of people who are much more, or potentially not even, diversity speakers or advocates, who are, yeah, just kind of experts in their own right, but they
Yeah.
weren't getting the recognition or the platform to, yeah, to talk about how great they are at, at what they do. So that was kind of how Spectrum came about, really. It was just a bit of a light bulb moment that there wasn't anything out there. And I always say, like, I didn't have any ambitions to be a business owner, but once I saw the problem, I couldn't unsee it.
Yeah.
And then Spectrum was born.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. And can I ask, like, were you working at the time of George Floyd, Black Lives Matter? Were you working for the other company, and were you seeing an let's get more diverse panels because this is happening in the world versus it being just a proactive change because that's how representation should be?
Basically,
Yeah.
yeah. I was working for another company, and there were lots of businesses, kind of doing pledges, and and talking about how they were going to kind of make changes in the industry, but actually weren't grasping the importance of representation.
Yeah, and you hit it the nail on the head there. It's like, yeah, a woman doesn't necessarily want to be wheeled out on International Women's Day to talk about finance. They want to talk about finance if that's their area of expertise throughout the year, and not talk about the women's issues. That's not their area, potentially, as an example. So,
Absolutely, definitely. And like, we are, every single person is not a monolith, and we are kind of intersections of our identity, and I think that that is important, but also, yeah, sometimes it feels like the labor is on people from underrepresented backgrounds to do the diversity work, when that's not necessarily what they've been brought into a business or an industry to do, or not necessarily what they want to do full time.
and do you mind me asking, do you feel that from a business owner perspective of when people reach out to your business?
Yeah. Yeah, very much. And I said this at an event recently when I was on a panel, and I said, ironically, I'm rarely asked to contribute to a panel to talk about the events industry or the speaking industry, considering I've been a figure in this industry for such a long time. It's almost always to talk about how we can bring about greater representation, which obviously is what I want to do, but also it's just like, just book my speakers.
Yeah.
That's how we can do
Just
it.
reach out to me
We can
for an
keep talking about it, but also you can just book people that are from different backgrounds, and you don't actually have to talk to me. It's fine.
yeah, book me based on my experience and knowledge. That would be great for this.
Absolutely, definitely. Let's just do the thing.
And how has it been then? So how did you go from, right, I'm gonna make a change, I'm gonna start this business? How did you go about that for anyone aspiring in the events or speaker industry to do something like that?
Yeah. Um, I wish that I could say, I wrote this business plan, and I sat down and I squirreled away X amount of money, and I did this and I did that. Um, but I didn't.
No, we're here for the truth.
um, I I wouldn't say that I'm impulsive. It wasn't like, oh, I woke up the next day and then I quit my job. But I had thought about it for a long time, and I'm the kind of person who really struggles to stagnate. And once I decide that something isn't for me, it gets to a stage where my heart's not in that thing anymore.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I just kind of took the leap. I'm fortunate and privileged in so much as, I spoke to my partner and I said, look, this is what I want to do. And he was like, okay, well, we can make things work for a little while. I spoke to people in the industry. I built my network. That was the first thing that I did, because I didn't have one in the same way. Like, I was known in the industry, but there weren't really people that I could necessarily lean on and say, look, I'm doing this. Um, So I just started to align myself with people who were doing the same thing, like yourself, and like how we met during mothers meetings
Mother's
during the
meeting, shout
pandemic.
out to Jenny, so long ago.
Absolutely. So yeah, just kind of started speaking to different mums, different women, especially who were, who were doing the thing, who had done the thing, and yeah, just kind of yeah, built up the confidence. I knew what I was doing because I'd been doing the work.
Mm,
So it was just a case of getting out there and making it happen. So there was a bit of a transition period, I would say maybe about 6 months,
mm.
of me kind of like figuring out like what my next move was, who I was going to speak to, and building connections before I just did it.
That's what I feel like I'm always trying on about it, but that's exactly it. You leaned into what you know, what you should do because you were an expert. So it's like, okay, I can do this. But then you communicated it to the person who's supporting you personally, who's your husband and potentially financially for a bit, and you guys figured out what would that look like. And then you just got out there and built your community, which is where we all have to start, even if you're like, it's very similar to what I did with Upsource and having a background, you still need to get yourself out there. And during a pandemic as well was so, I suppose actually for you, because at least everyone wanted VAs during the pandemic, for you, it was like very bold to start an events business during that. Was your first booking online or in person?
Funnily enough, it was actually, oh no, that's not true. No, it was online.
Yeah.
It was online, and it was an international booking, which was
Oh,
great because it was online. Yeah. And funnily enough, I found it a lot easier to build connections during the pandemic because everyone in the events industry was at home.
yeah. I say that a lot with Upsource actually. Like I feel it was so easy to like build connections with other people because yeah, well, and being pregnant. So I didn't want to go out anyway. So it meant
Yeah,
it was like the best time to build a business when pregnant in one sense. I was also in that sense, that was the best time, wasn't it?
definitely, absolutely. That was it. People were a lot more open to conversations. As I said, like it, the work that I was doing and kind of bringing about greater representation, was obviously really topical at the time. It was the forefront of everyone's mind. So it all kind of came together really nicely, even though I would say honestly, I didn't have that much work for the first few months
Mm,
because the industry was so up and down.
yeah.
It was like I'd have a booking and then it would get moved because we'd gone back into lockdown or yeah, all that kind of stuff. So
And I'm here for honesty because that's what it is like as a business owner. You can easily be like, wow, she's got this speaker agency. And the reality is, especially at first, you're like, yeah, I'm kind of living day to day as if this
yeah,
will actually go ahead.
definitely.
And how old was your child at the time? So were you juggling homeschooling or just childcare? How old was he?
Yeah, she
Sorry.
was, that's okay. I'm trying to think now. 8? Yeah,
Eight.
she must have been about 8, yeah, because she's
Oh
12 now.
gosh.
Um, but even that in and of itself was interesting because, before then, I'd kind of been doing, she'd been in breakfast club, and she'd been at after school club. She'd literally from the age of 9 months old, we'd only spent a few hours together in the evening. I'd managed to, in the early years do like 4 days a week. But
Mm,
yeah, for the most part, I didn't do the kind of,
yeah.
like before school, after
After
school.
school.
So
Mm,
even that and the homeschooling was a kind of a bit of a baptism of fire. But it was, a blessing because for the first time in being a mother, I got to drop her off to school leisurely in the morning and not be stressing and running for a
mm.
train and then running for a train on the way home. I could pick her up at 3:30. We could hang out together and I could truly build my work in and around her and her
Mm.
needs. So yeah,
It
it's been the best. almost the best bit of motherhood so far in a lot of ways.
Oh, that's so nice to hear because that's what so many go out to do. And it's like, and
Mm,
you got there like when, you went, did the work thing and do all of that. And now you just made work differently for you. And yeah, that's so nice that from the age of 8, you've had this time with her to
yeah.
do it, just try it differently and see if it works for you kind of thing. Because, some people it doesn't not. And they go back the other way. And so how was that? Did you go back to work from 9 months then? How's it going back in the events industry when you've become a mother? Because I talk about a lot of industries, and I think there's certain ones which aren't amazing for parenthood. So how was that?
Yeah, definitely. It's been tough. It's been really, really tough. I would say the first company that I was working for when I went back to work after maternity leave, um, I look back at that time and I think, oh, if only I'd known what I was to experience afterwards. So I left there after about a year, when Emma was about 1, just because I'd been there for like 5 years and I'd wanted to change, and I felt like I'd reached the ceiling of, of my opportunities within that company at the time. Um, and then I moved to another company, and they gave all of the lip service about being progressive and understanding that I have to leave at certain times, and
Mm,
everything else. And I would always work once I picked Emma up from nursery. I'd then after
mm,
cooking, and then I would work up until stupid o'clock at night. But the optics of leaving on time just put people's nose out of joint. And I think at the time when I was doing it, predominantly a lot of the workforce were a lot younger, so
mm,
they weren't parents yet.
yeah.
But even those that were parents, I think they had nannies and everything else, so they had made the decision that I don't want to say that wasn't their priority, but that was their workaround.
Mm,
And yeah, the first place I jumped to, I was there for 3 months. I left after 3 months because
wow.
yeah, it
You
was
couldn't.
it was awful. Um, the other place I went to was a lot better, but it was a maternity contract, ironically. So it's fine, but there wasn't a place for me when the person came back from maternity who I was
Mm,
covering. The next place, kind of similar. I was there for a longer time. It was 2 years. Um, but yeah, I mean, it was just always, when you have to leave on time, everyone's looking at you. And it's just the kind of feeling that you're
mm.
not pulling your weight, even though you are. Um, yeah, it was tough. It was really, really
Yeah,
tough.
and it's
And to get
like,
the flexibility, sorry, just to kind of
yeah,
like
no,
close off,
please,
but to
sorry.
get the flexibility that I needed, I went to a company that sort of said, yeah, great, you can do your 8:30 till 4:30, and we won't get you to do a load of work outside of that. But I had to take a massive pay cut. So yeah, yeah, it was really, really tough. And I definitely think that that's the biggest challenge still for mothers in most industries, but especially the events industry.
And so that was like your 4th company where you got to after parenthood that you found it, but then it came at a literally came at a
Yeah,
cost to find a
yeah,
company like that. And thank you for sharing because it is that it blows my mind still that, yeah, it's, young industries and we can't communicate with them why you have to leave, and it's even like you're doing wraparound care, nursery hours, I know at 8 till 6, so it's not even like the really short day that if you weren't doing wraparound care. But I was at an event recently, interestingly, where we talked about this, and it is that quite damaging, whether it's mothers or fathers, where they have made that sacrifice of nannies and or able or have the privilege to do that and want to do that, or au pairs
mm,
and do those hours. So it's kind of like you don't care about your career unless you do that as well.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I didn't want to do that because I felt like I wasn't spending enough time with my child as it was. And B, yeah, as you said, it's that I couldn't afford it on top of, like nursery fees and everything else. I can't then afford the additional wraparound care, and I just,
Yeah.
didn't have the space in my house, or and yeah, I just didn't find anyone that I wanted to leave my child with either.
It's such an interesting one because we had one in the beginning who was still friends and babysits, and we had and it wasn't full time, it was very fixed hours. And then we had one for like two after schools, and they went and got another job, and quite quickly on, as in a different industry, it was great for them, we're happy. It broke my son's heart so much that I was like, nope, not doing this again. I'm not bringing someone in who has that potential to just leave us.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah, I know some people, I've had people on this podcast who've been so lucky with their nannies and they've stayed for years. And I think I would love to welcome someone into my house that had that staying potential and would be right for us. But I feel like, oh, I'd rather just have people come in the business and then I'll be it.
absolutely, definitely. That's it. And it's 100% different strokes, different folks. Is that
Let's just say different strokes. Everyone gets
that's the one. Different folks, different strokes. Um, yeah, but it's definitely not a one size fits all. Not for the parent or the child, and businesses just need to be able to work around that as much as
Yeah.
possible.
And what breaks my heart is like so hard you worked in those evenings as well. Like that is we don't talk about that enough. And then also the fact that sometimes having evenings with your kids is like without your kids is a privilege in itself. Because we've just gone through a phase where I lost all my evenings for 3 months and we've got them back again. But teenager tantrums are real.
Yeah,
And there'll be something else that comes along. So you could never count them as a given. So I feel like the business should feel privileged that we have that time sometimes and then choose to spend it with them.
definitely, absolutely. Because by and large, we're only contracted for the number of hours that we're contracted for, and it's the expectation that you have to put in all of the extra time.
And that I think it's industries and why industries like events struggle because it is so much of that extra time, isn't it? Is based on your worth.
Yes.
Would you say?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely,
Mm.
definitely. It's yeah, it's very kind of time poor.
Oh, oh, sorry, you are there.
Oh,
Sorry, I lost you. So it's very time for, and and I was also it also probably makes an interesting parallel with creative industries. I did used to think this, like so many women go to events, but there's a lot of senior men in events, and it probably highlights that reason why. Because I always say we're doing a lot better job of getting women in the fields after graduates, and then I think we're now seeing where we're losing women, sadly.
yeah, absolutely, definitely. The ceiling is very evident. And yeah, it just goes back to businesses actually doing the work.
Mm.
All of that kind of flexibility is certainly possible within any industry, but actually, the events industry, you have job shares. You've got, yeah, you've got kind of flexible freelancing. Like there's so many ways that you can keep and retain women, of all ages and responsibility levels in your business. But I just think, yeah, there's just kind of so much rigidity in structure and how things have always been done, that yeah, that just kind of creating and perpetuating the problem.
And they're
Whereas,
literally losing money because it shows now a diverse board. I mean, like you make more money. So if there's not even at least a moral duty, there's like they were literally now saying there's a commercial duty here. So do you think this was your real shock for you for motherhood, or was there anything else you kind of felt? Because I always I know we've had someone on the podcast recently. We've been talking about pre-motherhood, and I think on a one-on-one basis, if I went to you, Lauralee, pre having a child, and saying this is going to happen to you, that's a bit shitty, and I don't tend to do that. But what do you think came as a real shock, or if we'd raised awareness, do you think it was literally making work from your whole industry experience, especially?
Yeah, yeah, that was definitely a big shock. I think I think in terms of the types of things that I was promised versus what I could get. But also I guess the biggest shock as well was probably how I approached motherhood. I think in lots of ways I was like, yep, I'm gonna go back to work after like 5 or 6 months, and I'm just gonna be fine, and it's all gonna be fine. And it was like, oh, actually, I quite like this. This is fun. I
Oh,
want to spend more time with this human that I've created.
oh.
So yeah, kind of not being able to do that as easily as I wanted to. Um but also I would say, like, from a personal perspective, is like, yeah, how it affects your relationships and networks and things like that, which obviously do have an effect on your work. I realized quite early on that that I didn't have anything in common with my daughter's father. And just in terms of, like, we didn't share the same values in and around, bringing up a child. And as much as we thought we did, and I thought we'd discussed this, I thought we'd agreed on this, and it was like, oh, actually, we don't fit together in this situation. I think
Oh,
that was
what with your
definitely.
partner, as in, yeah, you felt
Yes, yeah, 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 we
I love
separated.
talking. Oh, did you separated? Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah, we're divorced now. um
yeah, and
but yeah.
thank you for sharing that, because I think this is such a key point. Is that I'm not divorced, but gosh, it has been turbulent sometimes the past couple of years
Mm,
of learning how to figure out each other
yeah.
around a child. And I think I remember saying this after my first, and I think because it's kind of a bit taboo sometimes to talk about because everyone likes to be perfect. But I was a bit
Mm,
like, why did no one tell me how much this impacts your relationship?
yeah. Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. And I like, one of the things I say to friends, mostly girlfriends who, are kind of getting to the stage where they're like, I really want a baby, but I haven't found the right person. I have a few friends now who are just doing it on their own.
Oh, really?
And yeah, and it's amazing, and I love it, and I'm here for it. And
Yeah.
I say to people, like, if that's the one thing that's stopping you, don't,
Yeah.
like, go and do it on your own, because you could have a relationship that, that ticks all the boxes and looks great until you have a child, and then it might not exist anymore. So, don't let that kind of be the thing that stops you. I know, not to say that, oh, it's easy to do it on your own and without a partner, but
And you could get a
sometimes
new partner
sometimes
and
it
that
works out
works.
that way.
Yeah, and you can get a partner that works out and you even end up sharing the load. But I think I've spoken to many women who have partners, and sometimes it's like the load is not shared at all.
Yeah,
And that's fine.
absolutely.
Some couples that works. But I think I remember, like, I think my baby was 6 months. I was full-time working. We had friends come and stay because their house was being refurbed. So they were like, go out for dinner. We couldn't get through a dinner without an argument. Like, it was literally things
Mm,
like that I was like, "Wow, what's gonna happen to us?" And I think it
yeah,
is because it is this little, like, you've got, even if you have talked about things, or me and my husband, I think that's probably why we're still together, still have the shared values and the long-term goals and everything
yeah,
like that. But it's so hard to navigate, and I think that's such an important point to bring on. And I think even 'cause how was pregnancy for you? Did was it something that came easily? Did you have to have support getting pregnant? And what was your journey like with that?
yeah. I mean, actually getting pregnant was well, actually, I had no troubles getting pregnant. I had quite a few miscarriages. on the way to getting pregnant. And obviously that was, that was really tough. So yeah, it was tricky. Again, it's one of those things that nobody tells you. You just kind of think, okay, I'm ready to have a baby now, and I'm just gonna, do the thing, and then I'm gonna get pregnant, and it's all gonna be plain sailing from there on in. But it wasn't. Um, we didn't end up going through kind of like IVF or anything. In the end, it happened, and it was fine, and it was natural, and I actually had a great pregnancy,
Oh,
and birth, all of the kind of like textbook
good.
stuff. But yeah, but all of that, I guess, kind of takes its toll. The constant, like, is it happening? And then the disappointment when it doesn't happen and it doesn't go through, and then you're like, who is it? Is it me? Is it you? Yeah, so that before, another human comes along, and then your whole world is turned on its head, um, you know, for all the best reasons, but all all the worst reasons as well.
Yeah.
And I think, in hindsight, there were already kind of cracks and challenges in our relationship. But I think, if you don't have that really solid foundation, it can be the thing that tips you over the edge.
Thank you so much for sharing. And yeah, I'm sorry for what you went through. And I think key part was then you said, "Oh, I didn't have to do IVF." And I think sometimes we can dismiss what we've gone through because we know then other people have had gone further, but it's recognized you went on a huge journey to get
Yeah.
pregnant. And so thank you for sharing that. And I can only imagine, especially in the world you were in, having to kind of younger Lauralee having to navigate that and just probably pretend it wasn't happening maybe in the
Yeah,
workplace.
absolutely, definitely. There wasn't actually, no. Do you know what? I say that that's not entirely true. I did have a really lovely two senior female bosses, one of which was kind of going through the same thing.
Yeah.
So I was able to kind of speak to her, and when I was pregnant, and I was
Mm.
having early scans and everything, I could be truthful and let her know. So yeah, as I said, like, if I'd known, like, in hindsight, the other companies that I would work for afterwards, I wish I knew that they were actually, really, really great and really supportive, and unicorns actually
Oh,
in
wow.
that sense.
That yeah, it's so I think amazing. Good on you for like changing career at the 1 year mark. But I think sometimes yeah, I was in quite a toxic work environment and too scared to go and should have done before.
Mm,
But I can see, yeah, when you then start to realize actually I was in a safe environment, which
yeah,
you
yeah.
shouldn't we shouldn't have to be like, oh, that's lucky, but that should be the
No,
norm.
absolutely. That's
But
it. Yeah, we should be able to kind of take career leaps,
yeah.
without those kinds of challenges. But yeah, I acknowledge that I probably didn't realize how great they were at the
Yeah.
time.
And I can only imagine like during full time working all these hours and things, and then your relationship like not working out. Was that pre-COVID or was that
Yeah, no, that was pre-COVID.
yeah.
Yeah, it was tough
Yeah.
actually, and again, I guess with anything, quite financially so.
Mm.
Um, I'd
Yes.
kind of I kind of had to make really difficult decisions about when I could end that relationship, i.e., um, once my daughter wasn't in nursery anymore and I wasn't paying full-time nursery fees because I couldn't support myself on my own, in a property, paying rent and paying nursery fees at the same time.
Yeah.
So again, it's, all of those additional realities in and around being a parent, and yeah, kind of having those sorts of challenges, because on paper the amount that I was earning didn't make me kind of eligible for any other benefits,
Mm.
but actually, if you're paying nursery fees and you're paying, childcare, and then you're paying travel to get into work, and yeah, it was tough. It was really tough.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think that's so important to highlight because I think sometimes you can always see on the outside why someone is so driven and not see the reality. My parents got divorced when I was 2. So, and it's been for the very much for the best. You see, we're a good functioning divorced family. But I have seen from an early age how important it is to be financially stay not just stable, but be able to support yourself if you need to. And,
Yeah,
but that is the reality of nursery fees and on paper earning a certain salary that you had to wait. And I think, it's very easy. People are like, oh, hold back on your career. Don't do this. And it's like, do you know the reality of what someone might be thinking, someone's lived experience or someone's actual experience?
definitely. Yeah, that's it. There are so many variables, and I wish I wish I had a kind of an idea for how these conversations can happen better at work, and enabling employers, I guess, to kind of understand and to investigate a little bit more about what their teams are really going through in real life, because I think having a certain amount of support would have made those things easier, and in turn you know promotes loyalty within your teams, and and boost morale and all that kind of stuff. Like it's always a win-win situation, but it's one of those things where a lot of the time businesses, employers are kind of they'll see it as a can of worms, and and will shy away from it, whereas actually your recruitment and your retention challenges are a bigger can of worms in the long run.
And you'd be happier at work, 'cause you'd feel like it's a safe space and you'd be like, actually, I'm
Absolutely.
happy to go to work kind of thing. And I do think there's that whole tradition of like, well, you can't bring your whole self to work, but kind of thing. But then when we're living in a world now, work is taking over our lives, there's a payoff for that, that our lives then have to come into work, do you think?
Definitely, yeah. There's so much of a bleed now, and I think especially where there are kind of like more levels of flexibility within companies. If you're working from home, it's inevitable you have life distractions in the background, and even just with kind of how accessible we are, even if we're at work full time. That it wasn't like back in the day when you had a you just had your house phone, and
You're like, I'm
somebody would
home,
leave
I'm
a
home.
message and then you'd get to it when you get to it. But you're constantly accessible in by text or by email. So yeah, the two bleed into each other constantly, whether you like it or not.
Mm, um, have you seen anything since you started Spectrum coming into the events industry to support these changes? Has it, from an optimistic perspective, have you
Mm.
seen that change is starting to happen in the sort of companies and the sort of events reaching out to you for your speakers? Are you seeing a positive change at all?
Yeah, definitely. I think I did see something recently, and I wish I knew. I'm going to find out what they're called, and I'll come back and give you the name to add to your resource list. But I saw an event recently where they brought in like a creche.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah. So yeah, they brought in like a kind of creche nursery play area
Mm,
for parents to bring their children, and then they can go and do what they're doing at the conference,
mm.
which I thought was
Dreaming.
fantastic. Yeah. So yeah, so definitely things like that. I would say at events, like within going to events, are better. They're a lot more they're a lot more aware, a lot more conscious, a lot more inclusive. But I would say by and large, it's still not happening enough within the organizations.
Mm. Okay, so yeah, it's kind of like they're showcasing it on stage, but then it's not actually the values of the organization. Yeah, that
Yeah.
that makes sense. And what about paying as well? Are you seeing fees are leveling out for, say, I don't know, just women and men as an example, like speaker fees?
Yeah. No, I don't. I really, I would love to. I would love to kind of say positively. I would love to. I think what I've seen, and I've spoken to others, kind of other people in my network in similar spaces, especially kind of like within diversity and inclusion, that there was a kind of peak at like 2022,
Mm.
and then it's kind of dropped off again. It Sustainability, quite rightly, is obviously very high up on the agenda, but their conversations and initiatives that are happening in silos, and they're not kind of being treated with equal importance. And I get, obviously, if we don't have a planet, then DEI goes out the window. But equally, if we do manage to conserve this planet, then we need to all be working together in unity, and to continue to conserve it by, by everyone being treated equal and being able to contribute equally.
And part of conserving the planet is making it a livable space for human beings, and that includes
Exactly.
and we need a diverse set of human beings to make it functioning, although,
This is it. Well, we have a diverse set of human
Mm,
beings, but it's only mostly benefiting, certain humans. So yeah, it's like, how do we level that out at the same time
yeah.
as, as making sure that, we are being environmentally conscious and sustainable. Like, they're both, I would say, equal.
Yeah, it's about continuing those conversations, isn't it? Rather than just what
Definitely.
the trends are. Like, it shouldn't be a trend, it should be just
Yeah.
a continued conversation. And
Yeah.
on a spectrum then, so what do you think have been your biggest wins so far and your biggest failures in the business? Is there anything you're like, I totally shouldn't have done
Yeah.
that?
I mean, my biggest wins is that I've been really fortunate. No, I've worked hard, and I've made really great connections, and I've managed
Love
to work
that.
with.
You've not been fortunate. You've worked hard and made great
Yeah,
connections. Yes.
yeah. I had to just like check myself then. But yes, no. So I've been able to work with some amazing businesses. And said, I've done lots of work with Microsoft. I've done lots of work with PwC. I've been able to kind of work with some of the big logos. And some really great talent as well. We recently worked with Romesh for an awards, and he was just awesome. And like, he doesn't know it yet, but he's like my new best friend. Um,
I'm sure he does. He's messaging you right now, doesn't he?
yeah, he's like, stop texting me, Lauralee. It's inappropriate now.
Yeah, he's like, okay, right, we're gonna have to have a talk.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But yeah, so those have definitely been highlights. And also just the kind of the good, the kind of the giving back. I don't like to call it giving back, but that kind of work that I've been able to do, like kind of doing mentoring, and the work that I do with Deaf Rave, like that stuff, just, yeah, it really does fill me up.
Mm.
um so those are definitely some wins.
How did you get into
And
Jeff Brave before we jump into
yeah,
your failures?
sorry, say that
Before
again.
we jump into your failures, how did you get into Deaf Rave?
Yeah, so Deaf Rave, I went to a disability theatre show in at the Barbican, with a friend of mine, and I saw the founder of Deaf Rave, who is a deaf DJ, and
Mm,
he was just like pumping these like bangers, and everyone was dancing, and it was just a vibe, and he was just a vibe. When somebody's just magnetic.
mm,
And I was thinking about him in connection with Spectrum, and I was like, I want to know this person. And didn't really know very much about Death Rave at that point, but I reached out to him, and said, like, I'd love to work with you, across our events, and have you as our kind of key DJ, which we've done, and we still do, and it's fantastic. And at the time, he was working on his IPO for the Arts Council, and building his board, and said, will you be on my board? And I was like, yeah. So yeah, so that's how that came about. But the work that he does with schools, teaching deaf children to enjoy music. His mission is, I want every deaf child in the country, firstly, but in the world, to know and be able to enjoy and contribute to music. Like, it's just beautiful. It's perfect.
It is, and thank you for sharing about it. Shows how you make things happen. And I
Yeah,
think sometimes people just need that boost of being like, oh, if they see someone they respect, they want to get involved in. It's like, oh, Lauralee can do it. I can do it too. Like, just ask, and it ends up leading to more opportunities, like being on the board and opportunities for him,
absolutely.
obviously.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so, what are your failures then?
Yeah. So there have
Mistakes,
been lots.
failures? It's a really hard question.
There have been so many. Um, I would say probably like not having so much of a plan. Um, I think that it's been good for me in a lot of ways because it's meant that I've kind of been able to be flexible, but I guess I struggled with structure initially, and kind of like, how I was going to do things, how I wasn't going to do things. And I would say another one of my biggest failures was trying to please everyone and be everything for everyone. Like, I know when I first started Spectrum, and I was like, I have this clear mission, and I want to work with companies that are about representation. But when you're building your business and someone offers you money, or the potential of money, and um in the back of my head, I'm like, do they really align with my values? Like, are they really wanting to to kind of bring about greater representation, or are they just ticking a box? And so, yeah, in those times when I didn't go with my gut and just ended up embroiled in these client relationships that weren't kind of serving the greater purpose of what I wanted to achieve. Yeah, just, yeah, not kind of always staying true to my values. But I quickly learned that that how
I think
important
we
that
can
is.
all relate to that, especially in service businesses, because sometimes if a
Mm,
client comes along and hands you money and you're like, oh, should you be doing this? And you don't listen to that gut, which I think is hugely valuable. And we're speaking more and more about it's okay to listen to your gut. Not everything
yeah,
needs to be a logical decision kind of thing. Because it's normally,
definitely.
someone was telling me the other day, it is based on logic, your gut feeling, based on like stuff that's happened in the past that you're like, that happened that time. Should I be listening
Absolutely.
to my gut on this?
That's it. I mean, well, even physiologically, isn't it? They say, your gut is your second brain,
Yeah.
and the two work together, symbiotically, if you allow them to. So yeah, listening to your gut is logic.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Excellent logic. And we always do it. And when we don't do it, this is what
Yeah.
happens. We talked briefly about how your life changed with your work week and things. Is it still like that then? Are you still working flexibly, school hours, doing this amazing business alongside that?
Yeah, definitely. No, I'm still able to be flexible. Sometimes I work from home, sometimes I work from various co-working spaces. I think what's been great now is, now that I have a few other people in my business, it's enabled
Yeah.
me to kind of take on this other project for It Takes a Village. So I'm kind of, while I'm not I guess a director, I'm kind of like a founding consultant. Um, so yeah, I'm able to kind of do that and do Spectrum at the same time, because I'm not in the day to day all the time in the same way that I was. So yeah, so that's been great, being able to get to this stage where I can do other things and still not have to totally compromise on the hours that I spend at home.
Amazing. Like a successful founder would say, you've started to take yourself out the business day to day, which is huge, actually. So recognize that. And do you think, I'm now just thinking about you, like Lauralee, like trying to work all these hours, commuting to and from, do you feel like completely different person now and like more aligned with what you're meant to be doing.
Definitely, yeah, 100%. I can, just when I think back to that life, it just seems crazy.
Mm.
Especially as I said, like the commuting stuff. I would be up at like 5 in the morning just so that I could have an hour to myself and maybe do some exercise before I, got Irma up. And then it's like, come, go, 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 go. And like literally like running up the hill with her to like throw her in the gate at 7:30 so I could catch my train at 7:39. And like didn't speak to any of the other like parents or teachers. It's like gotta go. And then the same the other way around, leaving work, rushing through to kind of get the exact train that I could get so that I could pick her up before everything closes. And it's
Mhm.
just and that's before I've done a day's work.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you got to
I've
be
not
on it
actually got to
at
work.
work. And that's what I think is so interesting, and this is part of this conversation piece that's going to happen, is I think, someone not in motherhood, early, say a woman in their early 20s, starting their events career, probably would look at you on the surface and be like, "She is smashing it. That's the mother I want to be. You can do it." Whereas actually, she should be looking at you now as the one who's found her purpose, found her structure, parenting, and very much career focus as well, and successful, and you found your way kind of thing. And that's what we should be talking about, is that what how you were living is the traditional version of a working mother, and now we're through this podcast able to talk to mothers like you, like finding a new version that is more successful, would you say?
Yeah, and I want to say as well that it's not for everybody, and that's not to say
Mm.
I'm better than anyone. But I think there is a happy medium in terms of being really clear on your values and your boundaries at work, and what your non-negotiables are and how much you deserve to earn, and just kind of like making that happen, and
Mm.
prioritizing that. I think it's possible. I don't think it's easy, but I think it's possible. And I think you need to be clear on what that is. And having a business isn't for everyone, and that's
Yeah,
okay.
definitely. If it was for everyone, I think we'd all be doing it because the perks are
Yeah,
great, but it's really not easy. But like I said, and part of the work we're trying to do then, which hopefully have businesses that employ people, is that we make it more possible, and make it more possible for people who should be employed and want to be employed alongside being a parent, would you say?
absolutely, definitely. Yeah, I have a working mum in my business, and she kind of does the hours in and around. We are we're output focused, so it's not
Yeah.
like, okay, you have to do this hour between this hour. It's like, I need these things
Mhm.
done today, and do them however it works for you to get them done. The other person in my business, she works remotely. She's not a parent, but she lives in Cornwall. Sometimes she
Ah,
spends like
my
6 months
home.
in Australia. So like that's it. We can make it work. You just have to make it work.
Make it work. Love that, and thank you, and that's why women like you should own businesses, because you pay it forward to your employees and also to your mentees as well. So that was wonderful to hear. Lauralee, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm going to end on, what are your top 3 tips for someone looking to start a business in the events industry?
I had to write this down because I was like, I'm going to forget. So my top 3 tips. So my first one is build your network. I think naturally in the events industry, you have a network in terms of you have peers and people that but there's a different network for when you kind of want to start your own business, and that network are the people who have done it already. So yeah, just start reaching out, start speaking to people. It's You'll always find that people are actually really willing to help somebody else who's been in that situation themselves. Second one is get support as early as you can. So, like your business, it's pivotal for women who are starting out on their own. Like you can't do everything yourself. And it's understanding the value of your time versus the value of like paid support. I know like at the very, very beginning, it's really difficult, but actually, you can't do the finance, you can't do all of the marketing, wearing all of the hats is exhausting. So yeah, as early as you can, figure out what your biggest kind of need is and invest in that support. um and then set boundaries set boundaries and stick to them.
I stick to them. That's the
Yeah,
important piece.
exactly, that's it. Create boundaries for yourself, for your clients. Get very clear on like what you want that to look like how many hours you want to work, like, and what you want to earn, and make everything fit into the longer term vision. And it's not gonna happen overnight, but once you get really, really clear on what that looks like, it's not necessarily a business plan for everyone.
Mm.
But that's the kind of core structure that you need.
A vision. I love that because for some people it's so hard to sit down and write that plan. But those were amazing tips, and I felt so aligned with them. So thank you for the reminder. Now, what is next for Spectrum Speakers, and can you share some of your socials so we can go follow you?
Yeah, I guess what's next, just kind of onwards and upwards, really. We definitely are going to be doing more of our own events next year, which is going to be exciting. So look out for those.
I will.
And yeah, on socials, we are on Instagram at Spectrum Speakers UK. We also have a LinkedIn page, and our website is www.spectrumspeakers.co.uk. And you can also connect with me on LinkedIn, Lauralee Whyte with a Y. And yeah, that's us.
Reach out. She's lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank
You
you.
learned new things about you today, and it was really helpful to have you and speak to someone in an industry that I feel very together with, from the PA industry. So
Definitely.
no, thank you, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to Bump to Business Owner. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please do rate, review, follow, or subscribe wherever you're listening. It really helps us to connect with more mums and business owners. You can DM me on @BumpToBusinessOwner on Instagram, and I'll be back next week.